Hey everybody, this is Sarah Elena here in Jaco, Costa Rica, and today we're going to talk a little bit about cost of living. Cost of living is a really big topic, and we're going to think, okay, is Jaco cheaper than towns like Tamarindo, Nosara, Santa Teresa? How does Jaco compare to these other places in terms of the cost? In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the cost of housing, groceries, eating out, transportation, activities, healthcare, so that you can get an idea of how Jaco measures up to these other areas in the country. So, as you know, it's been a topic of discussion. Costa Rica isn't the most cheap country in Central America. In some ways, that can be a good thing, but I always do like to tell people that for me, I think personally, you can still live here on a cheaper budget than in North America and in, let's say, other European countries where people are moving from. It just really depends on, how you're living, how you're shopping, definitely evaluating your lifestyle, and, even down to what area you're actually choosing to live here in the country. So you might see online that, people say a single person can live pretty comfortably on $1,600 to $2,000 per month. I'm always a big fan of over budgeting if you've ever seen any of my past videos. And if you're a couple, maybe shoot between 2,000 and 3,000. If you're a family with kids, you're definitely going to want to keep in mind, private schools and other things of, well, having kids that definitely does make life more expensive. But I think overall, if you do budget well, then, you can live here within those ranges in the country. Now we're thinking about Jaco. So Jaco, I always pronounce it a little incorrectly, is definitely more accommodating and costs, unlike beach towns like Tamarindo, Nosara, Santa Teresa. Those have become really tourism hotspots or just hotspots for living, and the cost of living has definitely gotten a little bit higher there. But we'll talk about some real numbers and how Jaco actually compares to these towns. So first, let's talk about our biggest expense, or typically your biggest expense is going to be your housing, so your rent. So what do those prices actually look like in the town of Jaco? I would say I've seen one bedroom apartments that are, walking distance to the beach between 600, 900. I mean, you can even go up to 1,200, but that's a pretty nice one bedroom you're going to be getting for in the 1,200 range. But you can usually find something nice between 600 and 900. I've even seen sometimes two bedrooms for that price, but they'd definitely be smaller two bedrooms. Now, if you're a family or if you just need a little bit more space or a little bit kind of more luxury, then the prices you're looking at are going to be more, well, you can find really nice places within the 1,200 to even 3,000 range. So 1,200, you could maybe get a small house at that point, maybe a two bedroom. Definitely if you're going to push your budget up, let's say 2,200, you can find a pretty nice house with a pool. 2,500, pretty nice house with a pool at that point too, or a nice luxury apartment in town. So I think the prices in Jaco are great, but some people might choose that they also want to live a bit outside of town. So just north, you have the town of Herradura. You have all these little sub neighborhoods that you could even put you 5, 7 minutes outside of town that can make things even more affordable. You can come south, you can be in Playa Hermosa. Sometimes the houses in Playa Hermosa might actually be a little bit pricier because it is a higher demand area to live sometimes. And there's just not as much of an inventory of what you're going to find in the Jaco area. So how does this compare to some of our other more expensive towns? So like Tamarindo, Nosara, Santa Teresa. So in Tamarindo, for a one bedroom, I also want to mention this really depends on season that you're looking at. So we have our high season, our low season prices. So during tourist seasons, December to April, you're going to notice the prices are definitely going to be higher versus the rest of the year. So when you're looking for a rental also does, it's very important to really consider that. And so if you really want to be in an area that might be in a higher cost of living, a big tip for you would be to try to look during those lower season months. So like that May to November timeframe, be looking for your long-term rental then if possible. Or just be really flexible and prepare to pay a little bit more during those high seasons. So Tamarindo, let's say for a one bedroom, so versus Jaco, or maybe we're in the 600 to 900 range, or maybe even the 1,200 range for a really nice one, you're starting at about the 1,500 range, or maybe the 1,200, 1,500 range for something more, modern, comfortable, maybe with the typical type of amenities that you're used to. So I would consider, you want to make sure to have, your monthly expenses, you want to have a higher cost, you want to be prepared for a higher cost of living in terms of food, in terms of perhaps restaurants, again, your rentals. So you might be wanting to start around that 3,000 range versus the lower range that I talked about earlier in the video. Okay, next we're going to talk about Santa Teresa. Ooh, really hip spot. Like it's kind of one of those hot spots that a lot of people have just decided is where they want to live, which is great, but the prices have definitely skyrocketed there. In our experience, I remember, not too long ago, we had a hard time just finding a room in a hostel or a shared room in some house for someone that was under $1,000 per month. But if you get really lucky, you might be able to find something in the one bedroom range for 800. If you're, looking at a house and you're definitely gonna be looking at 1,500, 3,000, maybe even more than that. So Santa Teresa is definitely an area that's become a hot spot and it's pretty expensive, just like Nosara. So Nosara is another big one as well. I've had a lot of people who wanted to move to Nosara. On paper, they said, wow, this is the place that fits me, my lifestyle, and everything, but it didn't fit their budget. So when coming down to Nosara, we often have a hard time finding homes in the less than 4,000, 4,000 US dollars range. So if you're lucky, again, maybe you can find something 2,000, 2,500, but sometimes we're really just seeing places actually starting in the 4,000 range, which is pretty out of reach for, some people. So in general, Hako's prices are a little bit more comfortable there, definitely, and we'll talk about the other categories too. But I do just want to lightly touch on also just the price of real estate. Some people do come down interested in purchasing. So for Hako, you can sometimes get lucky and find something. I've seen something even under the 100K range for like a very older, maybe one bedroom condo. Definitely between the 100 to 200K range, you can still find some things in there too. Again, if you're very lucky, it's going to be something that's a bit older. And then definitely between the 200 and 300K range, I would say there's plenty of options within there. Hako's had a huge influx of, new apartments that have gone up. So there's a lot of condos available. So you can find something really nice within the mid 200K range, 300. If you want something more luxury, of course, you get your ocean view luxury towers that are in the 500K range, 400K range. But you also have your single family homes, you have your gated communities, you have your non-gated communities. I like to think that there is a little bit of something for everyone, but you do have a really good mix of prices in the area. Now, when we're looking at some of these other areas, let's say, compared to Nosara, Santa Teresa, Tamarindo, I think you'll notice that the prices are going to be a lot higher. For example, probably the average cost of a lot in Nosara could be the cost of an actual apartment or home in Hako. So these land prices, sometimes in these other areas are more expensive than just buying something outright in the Central Pacific, Hako area. Okay, so next we're going to talk about groceries and eating out. So I've been a big fan lately of just cooking at home because I will tell you the prices have been raising a little bit for eating out for sure too. We're all feeling it a little bit here in Costa Rica, but I always like to encourage, the clients we work with that you got to shop creatively. You're typically not going to go just to one place to do all your shopping. So if you can be smart, get creative, then you can make it affordable for your groceries. So I think in the Hako area in particular, you have enough a variety of grocery stores that between the farmers markets, the fruterias, different places where you can buy your meats or like I said, your fruits and veggies, your dry goods. If you're creative and you kind of really stay away from those imported products, if you try to eat as much, really as healthy as you can, the cheaper your bill's going to be. So for groceries, my biggest suggestion is limit your imported products. Don't always grab those brands that you might be used to because probably right next to it, there is already an off brand that is the exact same that's going to be half the price. So perhaps for a single person, you could be really looking at between the 400 and 500 range. Again, depending on your budget, depending on what you're eating, how you eat, your type of diet. But I think that could be fair to say for eating out. Now for a family, you could be looking between the 500 to $800 range. But again, these prices they really vary on you and your lifestyle and how, you're going to be actually shopping. Now, in the other areas, let's say, Nosara, Santa Teresa, where they are a little bit smaller in the sense that you don't have all the different grocery stores that are competing with prices, like here in our area in the Central Pacific and Hako. We're also very close to San Jose. So it's an easy day trip for people to go and perhaps buy cheaper goods just even further away. So when you get to these other smaller areas, sometimes there's a little bit less competition, which means higher prices as well. Now, eating out. I am a big fan of eating out. If you all know me, I am a foodie. I do like to eat out. I would say that Hako has a good mix. So just yesterday, I went to a soda and I want to say I spent maybe, yeah, $7 around. So it's about the medium, $5 to $9 for like a casado, a typical meal. So I spent $7. I got a big old, rice and beans and salad and meat and all the fixings. So, or, you can go to a nice, more fancier restaurant and spend $30 on an entree. So it definitely goes in between, but I think it's a good area where you can also find affordable places. Again, you have to really know where to go. Where are the local spots that the locals are going to? The best is just to ask the locals. And you can also find your more expensive restaurants too. In comparison, in my experience, when I've gone to places like Santa Teresa, Nosara, Tamarindo, you can find some of those little local gems. They're going to be a little bit fewer and further between. So the majority of your other options might be a little bit more expensive. So I can say your bill might be a little bit higher. So eating out is one of, and food and eating out are one of the cost of living elements that I have had, my clients come to me and say that they're actually pretty surprised, especially when traveling on their scouting trips. So I do urge you to budget a little bit more for that than what you think, especially in the beginning as you're learning. Okay, so next we're going to talk about utilities. So the actual, I would say, cost of utilities may not vary too much between these areas because these all are beach towns. So whenever you're going to see a varying cost in utilities, that might be whenever you're looking at a mountain town, and it really comes down to how much AC are you using. So I definitely recommend acclimate as quickly as you can to the climate because it's going to help your AC bill big time. So let's say if I've lived in homes in the past that where I just didn't have AC or I really didn't have to use it. So if you're living in a smaller home, maybe one of those smaller 1 to 2 bedrooms, and you're not relying on that as much, you maybe be spending between $40 to 80. Maybe the 80 would be with some use of AC, maybe at nighttime. Now, if you're looking at more like regular use, maybe a larger 2 to 3 bedroom home, when you got the ceiling fans, larger refrigerator, multiple AC units, you're definitely looking at more the 100 to 200 range. And again, depending on how you use it and how low you're going to have it, I've seen people's bills up to $500 or more for a 3 bedroom home. Now, not that your bill has to be that way, but it's definitely something to keep in mind, and just know that, the faster you can acclimate, the more you can save on those bills. Now, water is really cheap, which is amazing. But between $10 to $25. I pay around, maybe let's say the $25 range because of something strange with my gated development that I live. But I remember in the past, typically my bills really didn't go over $10 or $15. So water is super affordable here. Depending on where you're living, you may not even have a bill because your property could actually have a well, which would be nice. And then for internet, I do find it to be cheaper, than what I was paying in North America as well. I would say you can get a really good, decent service between $40 and $60. I have Starlink now, so that's about 40. But before I did have a wired in, fiber optic service here, and it was 60. So thinking about just to also the reliability of your services in these different areas. In Jaco, your electricity and water should be pretty reliable. Same with your internet, but anywhere in Costa Rica, you can be subject to outages. Tamarindo, you're also looking at pretty reliable services. Now, when you start getting outside of these towns, that's when, you can have issues at times. So let's say Santa Teresa, Nosara, even over here in Playa Hermosa, like the electricity went out down the street just yesterday. So it happens. Water's been out when they're doing works on the lines, but you might experience that a little bit more in the rural areas. So like Nosara, Santa Teresa, you could experience a little bit more outages than you would with a place that's a little bit bigger that has more infrastructure. Okay, so what are we looking at in terms of cost of transportation in these areas? So I can say in Jaco, when I have someone who says, yeah, I want to live by the beach, I want a lower cost of living, but I also don't want to have a car, I'm like, ding, ding, ding. Okay, this person could be a good fit to live in this area because I will say the local transportation options are great. First of all, it's not hilly. You can go ahead and use those legs. You can bike, you can e-bike, there's taxis, there's Ubers, there's the bus. I mean, really, to get from A to B within Jaco, biking or walking is honestly pretty darn fast. So I really like the town in that sense that you can get around. You really don't need a vehicle. If you want to rent a vehicle, let's say if you want to take a weekend trip, it's pretty darn easy to do so. There's plenty of rental agencies here in town. You can go ahead and rent a car and take a day trip or a weekend trip if you want to. So great area for someone who's not planning to have a vehicle. Now, let's say if you do want to have a vehicle, so maybe you want to live in Herradura, or you want to live in, like I said, South and Playa Hermosa, or you want to live in Jaco and you just want to have a car, which is totally fine. Things that you'll want to just consider. Well, the nice thing about Jaco is everything's very close. So you probably, if you're just kind of pedaling around town and doing your things, you're not going to be using that much gas. I have a Suzuki Grand Vitara, which is like a little kind of compact SUV now, and I think it's $50 for me to fill that tank, and I'm not complaining. Some of you know I used to have the pickup truck, and that was definitely a little bit more. But so really, gas isn't too bad. The tolls, very cheap. So I go to San Jose at least once a month. We're about, the Jaco area is about an hour and a half from San Jose, hour and 45 minutes. It's a very easy day trip, very easy, day trip, shopping trip to the airport. Even on gas, it really doesn't cost that much to get there and back. If you want to take a bus, you can take a bus for like $10. as well, or maybe it might be even less, to be honest. And there's buses that run, every hour going up to San Jose. So if you want to rely on local transportation, I think it's a great place for that. If you want to have your own vehicle, it's also great. We have mechanics, we have tire places, you're going to have everything that you really need to service your vehicle here in town as well. Now, compared to some of the other towns, if someone says, I'm not planning to have a vehicle, then there are some towns that I would not really recommend. I think Nosara could be a little bit difficult to manage without a vehicle. Tamarindo, I think you could be fine with or without one, of course, depending on where you're living. And then you're looking at Santa Teresa. If you'll notice down there, a lot of people get around on their bikes or quads. That's kind of like seems to be the style down there. But down there, you might also want to have a vehicle if you want to be able to, easily leave town and get around to other parts of the country. Okay, so what would be some of the cost of activities in this area? First of all, I always tell people the activities are kind of endless. I like this area because you can go hiking, you can go swimming, you can go surfing, biking, you can go to martial arts class or kickboxing or Muay Thai or spin or Pilates or I mean, literally the list is endless of what I feel like you can, see and do in this area for living full time. But of course, some of these things cost money. But I will say, I find the, let's say, extracurriculars, whether it's for kids or adults, to be really affordable. Oh, there's dance lessons. For me, there's just so much. So let's say a lot of people when they move to the area they want to learn how to surf, so you can usually get a board. You can rent a board between 10 and 20 bucks. You could take a lesson between 30 and 60 bucks. For me, there's tons of day trips, so I could go up to San Jose. I could take an hour and go down to Manuel Antonio. I could go to Carrara, National Park, just a little bit north. There's Punta Leona Beach. There's obviously lots of beaches that you can also just be at. So for me, or hiking trails, waterfalls, I mean, rivers. I don't know, the list, as you can see, I could go on and on. So for me, this area has so many free activities that literally cost you nothing, or the other activities, maybe like some of the exercise classes or things like that, might be between 10 and $20 max per whatever that might be. And there's just always something going on. So if you want to go out and not spend any money, you can absolutely accomplish that. Or if you just want to go spend a little bit and learn something new, you can definitely do that too. So in terms of also nightlife, Jaco has lots of nightlife. So there's lots of, well, and then again, that those prices can range too. There's lots of bars will usually have a drink deal or some kind of special, and eating out special as well, if you want to go out for a nice dinner. So you can keep it affordable by checking out specials and just knowing that there's kind of a place and budget for everybody in town too. Now, in some of these other areas, I think the prices could be similar. Maybe some of the main differences could be perhaps the eating out, or maybe let's say if you like to do yoga, let's say Nosara, that might be more of a luxury yoga studio that you might attend that might cost a little bit more. But overall, maybe those prices might be a little bit similar. But again, if you're looking at smaller towns too, then you might have less options of things that you can do. So just consider those things within your lifestyle and budget as well. Next, we're going to talk about healthcare. This is like a whole giant can of worms that we're not going to have time to open up in this video, but we can definitely elaborate on future videos. But for your healthcare options, you really have access. People really do a mix. So you're going to have the CAHA. If you are a resident of Costa Rica, you do legally have to pay into the public healthcare system of Costa Rica. So that rate that you're going to pay is really going to depend on your reported income. It's going to be between 12 to 14% or so of your reported income that you're using when you're filing. So that's a number that, again, we can talk about in a future video. I find that most people don't use the private system, let's say for your day-to-day things. It'll be good for you to have in case of an accident or emergency, or if that just happens to be the closest facility to you. So some people might also use private clinics. So for example, a dental cleaning, I pay $40. If you want it at like a nicer dental clinic, maybe a little bit more fancy, you might be paying more the $80 range. If you need to go see a doctor, a private doctor out of pocket for a visit, it could be $60 or $80 or 100 kind of max. Once we're getting into the 100, that's more of like you're seeing a specialist. So again, this is out of pocket without insurance, just going to the doctor at a private clinic in your town. What else would there be? People also will consider private insurance. Number one, make sure you get insurance that covers you in case of accident or emergency if you're going to be in the country. Whether you're on a trip or you're here for your move, do not come into Costa Rica unless you're covered in case of accident or emergency, because those bills definitely can add up. Now, we do have traditional health insurance plans. This is, like I said, these are things that we can talk about in the future, but those prices can really range depending on your age, the size of your family. I mean, yeah, you could be looking at 60 bucks a month or $300 a month. And it just kind of depends on what insurance you're looking at, your age. Just notice that, Costa Rica, most of these insurances do not cover any kind of pre-existing conditions, but the public health care system does. Like I said, it's a whole other can of worms, but just know that you potentially will be paying into the public health care system if you get your residency. You might want to consider a private policy. Definitely, no matter what, have something in case of accident or emergency, and be prepared to, pay some smaller things out of pocket and factor that into your budget. So, in summary, I would consider for like a single person, you might want to look at $1,800 a month or more for your budget living in the Jaco area. Or if you're a family or, a couple, definitely about $3,400 per month or more if you're living in this area. Now, if you're looking at some of the other areas, again, Santa Teresa, Tamarindo, Nosara, you're going to want to hike those numbers up. And if you're just feeling pretty clueless and you just don't know what your budget's going to be, I have something for you. It's going to be in the description below. I did a budgeting webinar months back, and in the webinar, I really teach you how to get actual numbers for things on your budget. So the webinar can apply for no matter where you want to live in Costa Rica. And I'll put the link in the description below. You can go ahead, sign up, watch the webinar, download the PDFs that you're going to need to accompany you, and actually have a great cost of living calculator that you'll be able to fill in with your own numbers. And I'm going to teach you exactly how to make your own cost of living budget for the town that you're looking at in Costa Rica.